The initial brief was to talk really specifically to an incredibly niche target audience, which was 14 to 19-year-old kids in inner city London. And the very specific brief was to build awareness for a guy called Derrick Rose, who is a massive basketball star out in America. But in the UK, the reality is no one knows him outside of basketball. So unless you're to go to a basketball court, you will just get blank looks everywhere. We wanted to do this thing where you sort of put an image of Beckham or Messi up, an image of Derrick Rose up, and you'll get absolutely blank looks everywhere unless you go to a basketball tournament in the middle of Hackney, for instance. And even then, you're not talking about a mass awareness. So the campaign really was to build awareness for this guy in order to make him an urban icon. So this wasn't one of those briefs where it's like, we want to sell a lot of shoes. What they wanted to do is, they've paid a lot of money for this guy. He's not famous in the UK. They wanted him to be famous in the UK, specifically against this demographic. So it was a very traditional awareness raising campaign. So you could have done that in a number of ways. You could have approached this from a really sort of obvious PR perspective, and you could have done all sorts of, things that you normally do there. But the reality with this audience is the radio stations they listen to are illegal. They don't read magazines. They're not online. Their social networks are impenetrable. So you're talking about sort of, BBM or physical places like chicken shops. So actually getting into these kids is really hard, let alone then talking to them, let alone then saying, and here's this guy and you should really like him.
But that's a much more interesting challenge, because it's kind of boring when someone says, oh, your audience is really accessible and it's these people. And I think it's just brilliant when you just go, it's incredibly hard to talk to them, which is why we then went and, jumping ahead, went and did stuff like literally go and talk to them on the streets, give them business cards, tell them where the thing was, because I think it just gets down to that really. There are lots of ways to promote it, but that is one really interesting way. There's nothing like going and talking to your audience and saying, this is what we're doing this is what we're doing, and this is where we're doing it. And then seeing a kid's reaction of literally, you're fucking joking, that's insane, when is it? And that's brilliant, because you go, well, there's an idea you've come up with, and this is how much of a shit a kid gives about it, and that's brilliant.
So I think one of the most exciting elements on the brief for us was the acknowledgement that this is a closed loop audience. You do not have access to them. You can't just book a convenient slot on TV and 50% of them will be watching. It does not exist. They don't care. They're out on the streets and they don't want to talk to you. And I think acknowledging that reality is fundamental for a brief like this, because if you don't, you're fucked, because no one will turn up. So I think that forces you into some really practical decisions that a lot of the time creatives don't have to face.
Well, and then people would start doing Facebook and Twitter, and that's just not how they communicate.
They're not on it.
They don't care. But that would traditionally, a lot of people just go, oh, that's definitely the way to get the kids. No, it's not. Not these kids, absolutely it's not.
So we went with so the first phase obviously was, how do you even get them to know about this store? So the first thing we did, we had a sort of a three-pronged attack, which is, we know pirate radio is really big in their lives, but you can't traditionally put an ad on pirate radio, but we got into them and we gave pirate radio DJs a pair of trainers each and basically said, promote it during this time, which they duly did. We put up posters in chicken shops because we knew this is where our audience were hanging out a lot. And then the main sort of strand of it was...
It cost £1 to put the posters in the chicken
basically,
shop.
Whatever
each poster was £1.
Whatever the guy who owned the chicken shop wanted to charge you, that's what we paid.
Sometimes it was 50p.
Yeah, so our media sort of cost was not high on that. And then the third one we did was the most sort of ultra direct engagement piece, which is literally going out, talking to our audience where they were. We found out there's a basketball tournament about a week out, very nearby. So we went there, we chatted to all the kids, all the coaches, everyone there who could possibly be connected. And that was both fortuitous, but it was because we were in the environment. We hadn't just sat in the office, we'd gone out, we were exploring Hackney. Because I think one of the things we thought is, if you go out on the streets, you'll find loads of these kids, but you don't. They're at home, they're playing Xbox, and it's very hard to get access into them. So getting into a basketball tournament was key, because then you are finding this niche within a niche, basically. Kids who are 14 to 19 playing basketball in Hackney, which is a lot harder to find than you think. So the idea had been brewing in our heads for a while of a physical challenge where kids in inner city Hackney, who are normally facing kind of not really cool challengers who basically can't afford these shoes. They want to go stuff and they're constantly sort of squashed down. They can't afford stuff. Life's pretty shit. Those two things came together. A physical challenge that we thought, wow, they're going to be really good at this and they might not know, combined with let's give them something free that they really fucking want. One of the most stolen things during the riots was Adidas, Nike. Kids went to steal trainers. And I thought it was both a sad indictment on our culture, but also a really interesting exercise in maybe they're not getting the sporting outlet they need. Now, they're not doing the riots because they can't play football, but there's some really interesting thing that combined there, where we said, let's do a physical thing. We don't want them doing this with their thumbs saying, hey, I like Derrick Rose. I want them engaged in a hardcore physical activity with no technological requirements whatsoever, with an incredibly simple, delineated physical challenge. Can you jump 10 feet?
I think also chatting with the clients, I think it was pretty clear that we thought and they thought an event was the right way. I think typically, typically I just think most events are shit, and they get lots of people to blog about them and talk about them, but it's just a lot of hype. And I think there's something absolutely brilliant if you can go, let's do something so clear or so clean and cool where like 3,000, 4,000 kids actually show up because it's that good. And they've got a lot of things they want to show. They've got a lot of things they could be doing. So if you get them to show up, then it means you've done something pretty decent.
So the reaction from the client was brilliant. I mean, their sort of KPI was let's get loads of people down at the store. Let's have kids having a brilliant time. That's it really. I mean, obviously, and off the back of that, they were aware that they'd built awareness, what with it being called the Rose Jump Store, it's fairly kind of like, bang on branding. So they were thrilled. I think what they acknowledged was that the reality of putting on a basketball event in London with a country that doesn't care about basketball, a large swathe of our demographic doesn't care about basketball, having a successful event where everyone's coming along, having a fucking wicked time. And you've got that classic thing of every kid there with their phone. Now, these are the same kids where at the start, if you'd said, do you know who this guy is? They'd have said no, but he turns up and they've all got their phones out.
And then they all go away thinking he's a megastar, which he is.
Yeah, so they're very happy there because you've obviously built awareness. You've taken it from a guy they don't know to a guy they're all filming when, 24 hours, 48 hours before, they said, do you want to film D Rose? And they said, who's D Rose? So creating that kind of awe around him, that's the build the awareness of this guy that they wanted. So yeah, super happy clients. I think a live event is not always a better route. No. I think it can be if amazing engagement is what you're after. If you're after people having that kind of reaction where you had when you went to Disneyland or Alton Towers when you were 10 years old, and it's just, oh my God, something amazing happened to me. I think a live event can smash anything because a TV ad is just never, for me, it's never going to do that to you. A poster is never going to do that to you. So I think in terms of, admitting that everyone's got that kid in them, everyone's able to be goosebumped, I think events can beat anything. But they also have huge potential to go wrong because you have such high expectations of them. So I think they are changing marketing in terms of more marketeers looking towards them. But I think for some brands, they're still a tremendously risky answer. And you need to be a very, very brave brand to take them on. Adidas being one, Red Bull being another, Gatorade. I mean, so sports specifically, I think are super cool for events.
Whereas if you're doing a toilet roll, I don't think toilet rolls should be tweeting, and I don't think toilet rolls should be doing events. But there will inevitably be a desperation of, what's our event? What's our tweet? You don't have one, you're a toilet roll.
So I think, as always, events have an appropriateness. Some brands are really, really appropriate for certain media channels. And I think in this particular case, Adidas needed an event, and I think it was absolutely right for them.
Yeah, Adidas can do it because they're cool, right? And kids are just expecting them to be cool. So it's no surprise when they come along and do something cool. Whereas other brands, there'll be an expectation of just people's gut instinct of, oh, that's a bit odd. Whereas if Adidas do it, it's not odd at all. You just go, yeah, why not? They're Adidas, yeah.